Something is wrong with this painting. You might not notice it right away. At first, it looks like a straightforward scene. A young woman standing behind a bar, bottles of champagne to one side, a bowl of oranges to the other, a crowd behind her enjoying the show. But if you look a little longer, something starts to feel off. The reflection in the mirror doesn't match what you see in front of you. The woman behind the bar is facing you directly, but in the mirror, she's turned to the side, leaning toward a man who shouldn't be where he is. The bottles are in different positions, the angles are wrong, the space doesn't work, and for nearly 150 years, people have been arguing about whether Edouard Manet made a mistake or whether this broken mirror is the entire point. This is a bar at the Folies Bergère, painted in 1882. It was Manet's last great work, and he knew it would be. Let's look closely. The woman at the center is standing behind a marble-topped bar. She wears a dark velvet jacket with lace cuffs and a lace collar. At her chest, a small bouquet of flowers, roses, pink and white, is pinned to her neckline. A black velvet ribbon wraps tightly around her throat, with a small gold pendant at the center. Her hair is blonde, cut in bangs across her forehead, and she wears pearl earrings. Her hands rest on the counter, spread apart. She looks directly at us. And that gaze? That is where the painting begins. She is not smiling. She is not performing. She is not engaging. There is something in her expression that is difficult to define. Some have called it melancholy. Others call it exhaustion. Others see detachment. The look of someone who has stood in this exact spot, under these exact lights, serving these exact drinks hundreds of times before. She is present in body, but somewhere else entirely in mind. In front of her, the marble counter is crowded with objects. To the left, bottles of champagne with gold foil tops. To the right, a crystal bowl filled with bright oranges and 2 bottles of Bass Pale Ale, identifiable by the iconic red triangle on the label, one of the first registered trademarks in history. Everything is painted with extraordinary precision, almost like a still life embedded within the scene. But the real complexity begins behind her. What appears to be a lively crowd, hundreds of people, chandeliers, the glowing orbs of electric lights, even the green-booted legs of a trapeze artist dangling in the upper left corner, is not behind her at all. It is a reflection. The entire background is a mirror, an enormous mirror stretching across the wall behind the bar, catching the interior of the Folies Bergère and throwing it back at us. Which means what we see isn't the world beyond her, it is the world in front of her. Our world. We are the crowd. And here is where things break apart. In the mirror on the right side, we see the barmaid's reflection, but she is turned at an angle, leaning slightly forward, appearing to speak with a man in a top hat. That man is standing right where we should be, where the viewer should be. And yet, there is no trace of him on our side of the bar. The reflection of the bottles is shifted too far to the right. The barmaid herself appears wider, more slouched, less composed than the woman facing us. It is as if the mirror is showing a different moment, a different version of her, a different encounter. When the painting appeared at the Paris Salon of 1882, critics noticed immediately. Some accused Manet of carelessness, a painter who couldn't handle perspective. A satirical caricature in Le Journal Amusant helpfully drew the missing customer back to where he supposedly belonged, joking that Manet must have been distracted. But Manet was not careless. We know this because we can trace the painting's development through earlier studies. In his preparatory sketch, the reflection is much closer to accurate. The barmaid stands slightly off-center. The angles are plausible. It was only in the final painting that Manet deliberately distorted them, pushing the reflection further to the right, making the spatial logic impossible, forcing the viewer into a position that cannot physically exist. The question is why? And the most compelling answer is that Manet wasn't painting what you see. He was painting what it feels like. The Folies Bergère was the most famous music hall in Paris. It opened in 1869, in the 9th arrondissement, and quickly became the place where all levels of Parisian society mixed. Bourgeois men and their wives, students, artists, and sex workers. The entertainment ranged from opera and ballet to acrobatics and comedy, and the atmosphere was loud, smoky, and charged with desire and commerce. The barmaids were a central feature. Young women, often from the working class, hired to serve drinks but also implicitly be looked at, to be available. Contemporary accounts make it clear that many of them were expected to be more than bartenders. The presence of oranges in the painting, a known symbol of prostitution in Manet's visual vocabulary, has held many historians to conclude that Suzanne, the real barmaid who posed for this painting, occupied that ambiguous space between employee and commodity. And this is what Manet captures. The woman who faces us is still, composed, guarded, but her reflection, her other self, is already engaged, already leaning toward the man, already performing the transaction. It's as if the mirror shows not what is literally behind her, but what is expected of her, what she must become the moment she stops looking at us and turns around. Her name was Suzanne. She was a real barmaid at the Folies Bergère, and Manet invited her to his studio to model for the painting. By this point in life, Manet could barely work. He had contracted syphilis decades earlier during a voyage to Rio de Janeiro as a young man. And by the late 1870s, the disease had progressed to its tertiary stage. He suffered from locomotor ataxia, a degeneration of the nerves in his spinal cord that caused chronic pain, unsteady gait, and increasing difficulty standing or holding a brush for long periods. In his final years, he painted mostly small still lifes of fruits and flowers, less physically demanding than large compositions. But for this painting, his last major work, he pushed through. He set up a mock bar in his studio, marble counter, bottles, fruit, and he painted Suzanne against it, building the scene piece by piece. He knew this would most likely be his final statement to the Salon. In January 1882, he had been awarded the Legion of Honor, a recognition that came decades too late for a man who had scandalized the French art world with Le Déjeuner sur l'herbe and Olympia 20 years earlier. A bar at the Folies Bergère was exhibited at the Salon of 1882 and received a mixed reception. The following year, gangrene from syphilis forced the amputation of his left foot. 11 days later, on April 30th, 1883, he died at the age of 51. He was buried in the Passy Cemetery in Paris. His friend, Antonin Proust, later had an epitaph engraved on his tomb: Manet et manebit, Latin for he remains and will remain. Today, a bar at the Folies Bergère hangs in the Courtauld Gallery in London. It is considered not just Manet's final masterpiece, but one of the most important paintings of the 19th century. And the mirror at its center continues to do what Manet intended it to do. It refuses to show us what we expect. It breaks the rules of space and reflection, not because Manet couldn't follow them, but because reality was never what he was painting. He was painting the gap between how things look and how they feel, between who we are and who we perform, between the woman facing you and the woman in the glass. I'd love to know what you see in Suzanne's expression. Is she bored, heartbroken, numb? Or is she seeing something about us that we'd rather not admit? Tell me in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.